Unit 5, Reading 1.
How People Learn to Become Resilient by Maria Konnikova. Norman Garmezi, a psychologist at the University of Minnesota, met thousands of children in his 4 decades of research. But one boy in particular stuck with him. He was 9 years old, with an ill mother and an absent father. Each day, he would arrive at school with the exact same sandwich, 2 slices of bread with nothing in between. At home, there was no other food available, and no one to make any. Even so, Garmezi would later recall, the boy wanted to make sure that no one would feel pity for him. Each day, without fail, he would walk in with a smile on his face and a bread sandwich tucked into his bag. The boy with the bread sandwich was part of a special group of children. Garmezi identified this group of kids as succeeding, even excelling, despite incredibly difficult circumstances. These were the children who exhibited a trait Garmezi would later identify as resilience. Resilience presents a challenge for psychologists. Finding out if you have it or not largely depends on the way your life unfolds. If you are lucky enough to never experience any sort of adversity, we won't know how resilient you are. It's only when you're faced with obstacles, stress, and other environmental threats that resilience, or the lack of it, emerges. Do you fall apart, or do you rise above it? Environmental threats can come in various ways. Some are continuous, such as poverty and challenging home conditions. Other threats are acute. Experiencing or witnessing a traumatic violent encounter, for example, or being in an accident. What matters is the intensity and the duration of the stressful event. Garmezi's work looked at protective factors, the elements of an individual's background or personality that could enable success despite the challenges the person faced. His research identified elements that fell into 2 groups: individual psychological factors and external environmental factors. In 1989, a psychologist named Emmy Werner published the results of a 32-year project. She had followed a group of 698 children in Kauai, Hawaii, from before birth through their 3rd decade of life. Along the way, she'd monitored them for any exposure to stress, poverty, problems in the family, and so on. 2/3 of the children came from backgrounds that were essentially stable, successful, and happy. The other third qualified as at risk. Like Garmezi, she soon discovered that not all of the at-risk children reacted to stress in the same way. 2/3 of them developed serious learning or behavior problems by the age of 10, or had other more serious mental health and behavior problems as they became older. But the remaining third developed into competent, confident, and caring young adults. They had attained academic, domestic, and social success, and they were always ready to take advantage of new opportunities that arose. What was it that set the resilient children apart? She found that several elements predicted resilience. Some elements had to do with luck. A resilient child might have a strong bond with a supportive caregiver, parent, teacher, or other mentor-like figure. But another, quite large set of elements was psychological and had to do with how the children responded to the environment. From a young age, resilient children tended to meet the world on their own terms. They were autonomous and independent, would seek out new experiences, and had a positive social orientation. Werner wrote, though not especially gifted, these children used whatever skills they had effectively. Perhaps most importantly, the resilient children believed that they, and not their circumstances, affected their achievements. The resilient children saw themselves as being able to make good decisions about their obstacles to improve their future. George Bonanno is a clinical psychologist at Columbia University's Teachers College and has been studying resilience for nearly 25 years. Garmezi, Werner, and others have shown that some people are far better than others at dealing with adversity. Bonanno has been trying to figure out where that variation might come from. One of the central elements of resilience, Bonanno has found, is perception. Do you perceive an event as traumatic or as an opportunity to learn and grow? Events are not traumatic until we experience them as traumatic, Bonanno told me. Take something as terrible as the surprising death of a close friend. You might be sad, but if you can find a way to see that event as filled with meaning, perhaps it leads to greater awareness of a certain disease or to closer ties with the community, then it may not be seen as a trauma. The good news is that positive interpretation can be taught. We can make ourselves more or less vulnerable by how we think about things, Bonanno said.